Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we are joined by Lakeside Insurance to present Navigating the Digital World. My name is Dave Yosta. I'm the president of the MSPAA, and today we have our presenter Jake Sharon from Lakeside Insurance. During the course of the presentation today, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments box, or you can post them in the chat box through the live stream webinar. Jake, at this point in time, I'd like to hand over to you. All you, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you and the Managed Service Provider Association of America for having me on today to host this webinar where we're going to discuss and navigate the digital world. So we're really going to be touching on a bunch of different topics regarding risk management for MSPs and for your clients. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please make sure to reach out. You can put a question in the chat. I will stop and I will continue to kind of talk and discuss those questions throughout the presentation. So a little bit about myself and about Lakeside before we dive in. Lakeside Insurance is located in Arvada, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver if you're familiar with the area. We're a 24-year-old private independent insurance agency. We provide different types of solutions for different clients, and we look at insurance through a different lens than most agencies do. My title here, I'm a risk architect, and you might be wondering, what is a risk architect if you're in the insurance side of the house? And what that is I help and design different sorts of risk management and insurance plans and programs to help mitigate risk and take concerns off of business owners so they can worry about creating a strong revenue stream, keeping their clients happy, and keeping employees happy as well, while I'm focusing on helping them with the insurance program and risk management. So we're going to jump in today and kind of really get into this. And I do specialize in cyber insurance, cyber liability. That's a passion of mine and something that I'm really going to be touching on a lot throughout this webinar today. So with all of my clients and with people that I meet that are just interested in having a conversation, there's three pillars that I'm always doing and always having conversations with regarding this information. So first, I like to educate, then I like to explain, and then I like to provide resources. Because at first I'm going to educate, we're going to have a conversation, whether that's about your cybersecurity and if you are the MSP or we're talking about your client's cybersecurity at first to say, okay, where are you right now? What do you need to comply with? Do you have any sorts of NIST or maybe CMMC? Is it different SEC regulations because you're a financial advisor or you do tax software or services with different types of accounting? And then once we understand that, we can then explain, okay, what are the steps that we need to do to get you in the right place? Whether that's because you want to put a strong cyber insurance policy in place, or you have requirements from one of your clients saying that you need to carry certain limits, or maybe it's a contract that you're not too happy with the wording in it and they're not willing to negotiate, but you want to keep the deal in place. And so we need to structure different sorts of risk management programs around that for you all. And then lastly, I'll help provide resources, whether that's different types of employee trainings for cybersecurity, if we're doing phishing simulations, if you need help with multi-factor authentication. And again, if you're the client of the MSP, I'm working with your MSP hand in hand, and we'll kind of touch on that relationship throughout the webinar. But something that's really important to understand is that I can and I do provide a little bit of different resources to MSPs, to your clients than you might have currently. All right, so let's talk about some current cybersecurity risks and trends that I'm seeing right now with businesses every single day. What I'm sure you're all hearing about in the news, you get emails about it daily, you see things on LinkedIn, wherever it might be that you receive any of that news information from. And so really, we're going to kind of go through some of these and discuss, okay, why is it so important for MSPs to discuss this with their clients? Why is it so important for me to discuss that with your clients? And then for me to discuss that with the MSP as well. So we've got our phishing attacks, business email compromise, ransomware, business interruption, and fraudulent transfers of funds. So obviously, starting from the top, phishing attacks that we're seeing are constantly happening, especially now that artificial intelligence has become so prevalent and is so much stronger than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. These bad actors and cyber criminals are able to create emails in different languages and have AI translate them into a message that they want. Rather than looking like broken English that we used to see on some of these, it's much more real and looks like something that you might receive on a daily basis. And of course, that's going to jump into the business email compromise. Was your client's business email compromised? Was your email compromised? What potentially may happen? And again, with this new AI technology that we have out there and the ease of creating phishing simulations and being able to manipulate people, we're seeing emails get compromised drastically. And this is extremely important to notice. Whether you are doing those phishing trainings or you are interested in learning more about that, reach out to your MSP or reach out to me and we can have a conversation to say, okay, how risk adverse are you? And what different risk management procedures do we need to put in place for you and your firm? Whether that is a cyber incident response plan, whether there are different disaster recovery plans that we need to put in place, and just having that conversation and being prevalent and proactive, not reactive, is so important. Next topic we're going to touch on, ransomware. We all see it in the news all the time. Obviously during COVID, once everybody started working remotely much more quickly than we had previously, that's where we saw a lot of ransomware. Whether you are the MSP, whether you are the client, ransomware is not something that you want on your systems, not something that you want on your servers, and you don't want this to disrupt your business, nor do you want your clients to know that you potentially had ransomware. So from the MSP perspective, if you're helping one of your clients and you're doing all the cybersecurity that you can for them, what are you doing in the instance of a ransomware claim if your client doesn't have a cyber insurance policy? Or are you comfortable negotiating cryptocurrency amounts with a cyber criminal in order to get the keys back to the server or to decrypt any files that they have taken from your client potentially? And most time the answer is no for that. You want to be able to rely on a cyber insurance policy as your last line of defense to protect you and your client if any of these things were to happen. And from the client perspective, if your MSP is helping you with all of your cybersecurity, obviously there's such an important relationship to you, but they're not the one that's able to make sure that each of your endpoint users are making sure that every single thing that you're doing for your company is exactly what the owners, the CEOs, the CFOs are wanting them to do. So whether they click on a malicious link or they end up getting socially engineered or phished into doing something, making sure that you have cyber insurance policy as the last line of defense to help in these situations is extremely important. And that'll jump into the business interruption and fraudulent transfer of funds too. Again, as an MSP helping your client, if you need to be working on their server for a week or 2 weeks to potentially get them back up and running and online because they did have a ransomware situation, well, how much lost revenue are they going to be out? What are you going to be able to do for all the payroll that was potentially missed during this time for your clients? And then also, what about those projects that they were working on for their clients as well? Well, having business interruption as a part of your cyber insurance policy is so important because it can pay for those lost wages, that lost revenue, and help figure out what you need to do with that client so you don't lose them now and potentially in the future. And again, fraudulent transfers of funds, we're seeing it all the time. It happens way more than we wish. And again, it's making sure that you're doing the right things and having the correct measures in place. Are you picking up the phone if you're sending a transfer of over $25,000 to make sure who the person is on the other line that's receiving it? Again, these are things that we're seeing every single day in the cybersecurity space, and having that last line of defense of a cyber insurance policy is obviously not just amazing for the client, but it's also great for the MSP that helps that client knowing that even if I do every single thing correct, if one of their endpoint users clicks that malicious link, does something incorrectly, I know that my client is going to have coverage and they are going to be made whole in a situation in which there might be a cyber incident. I'm going to keep touching on this. It's something that I'm always discussing with my partner clients. I find it so important, and you have to do these things in order to be proactive, not reactive. If you're going to wait for problems to happen and then they do happen, what are you going to do to fix them? How are you going to be able to get yourself and your company in a better place had you had one of these cyber incidents and not been prepared? I touched on it before. Security awareness training, whether it's quarterly trainings, whether it's monthly trainings, or just semi-annual, have these, whether you are the MSP pushing to the client or the client that says, hey, MSP, can you help me get this set up? This is also a benefit of a cyber insurance policy. So again, there's plenty of different avenues. You just need to raise your hand and have the conversation and say, okay, maybe we do need to do this. And whether that's implementing a security awareness training and then also in putting that into an employee review at the end of the year. So whether it's saying, hey, Jake, it looks like you did great on 3 out of 4 of your trainings, but on the 4th training, it looks like there were some problems. What do we need to do to help you, whether it's with phishing or potentially being socially engineered or making sure that you are doing the dual means of notification if there is a different types of transfer of funds? All these things are very important and they're crucial in being proactive and not reactive. The phishing campaigns go hand in hand with the security awareness training. We're doing it here at Lakeside. We help our partner clients put these in place. So rather than clicking a link and now ransomware is potentially deployed on one of your devices, you click a link and then it brings you to a video in which you watch, learn, and figure out how to not make this mistake again. The simple buzzword that we all hear, we've been hearing it since COVID, multi-factor authentication. Just making sure that something is going to your phone, whether it's a text, a phone call, making sure when you log into something that it's actually you. I know that 99.9% of people don't leave the house without their phone, and those 0.01% that do leave the house without their phone probably just left it there. And so making sure that you have that device next to you while you're doing your business can be a huge, huge, huge risk management piece in not allowing someone to potentially log in to one of your websites, your portals that you use for work, whether it's for financial transactions, anything like that. Put multi-factor authentication in place in as many spots as you can, and having that conversation with your MSP is so important. Lastly, in this slide is the cyber incident response plans. I touched on it before, I'll touch on it again. What I'm always discussing is that if you're at your office space and you have a fire go on at the office, everybody knows to go out the back door or to go out the side door and to get outside and to go away from the building. But if there's a fire on your computer, do you know where to go? And as an MSP, are you helping your clients put cyber incident response plans in place? Because we all know that usually these cyber incidents happen once a business owner is on vacation or on a business trip, because the cyber criminal has been sitting in and watching and seeing how they can work within their system. And once the owner's gone, they know that the floodgates are going to be open to potential hacks. So putting these cyber incident response plans in place with your MSP, with your insurance agent, whomever it may be, just make sure that everyone's on the same page and they all know the right way to react in these situations.
Jake?
Yeah, Dave.
Sorry to interrupt you. We had a question coming through our chat, one of the chat channels. Could I go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, please do.
Great, thank you. In the event of a cyber incident, how can an MSP and their clients effectively navigate claims processes with cyber insurance providers?
That's a great question, Dave. And I'm going to jump back to the last slide as we kind of touch on being proactive, not reactive. So having a cyber incident response plan in place and training all employees so that they know who to go to in this incident is the most crucial thing to do. So having the conversation with your MSP saying, if we have a breach, where do we need to go? And checking out your state, your federal, your local guidelines as well is extremely important to navigate that too, and then relaying that to your cyber insurance carrier. So I know here in Colorado, we have the Colorado Consumer Protection Act. And if there is a breach on your server, wherever it may be, of 500 Coloradans, individual, personally identifiable information, you're not required to report that to the Attorney General. So what that law might be in Florida or California or New York, I'm not exactly sure depending on where you're located, but having those conversations and making sure that everyone's on the same page is so crucial. And then, like I said, relaying that to your cyber insurance company and allowing them to bring their forensic team in to work with your MSP to say, how did this get in? How did this get out? And how can we mitigate this in the future is a very, very important process between all moving parts and pieces. So thanks for stopping me there, Dave, and asking that question, because that's really important to just understand that we all need to be on the same page when handling this. So on this slide, going to continue discussing navigating cyber insurance. So we kind of talked about the digital world, what I'm seeing out there, the different types of trends in the industries. But now we need to look at the cyber insurance policy itself. So whether you're the MSP listening, whether you're the client listening, do you have a cyber insurance policy in place? Thankfully, once everyone went remote during COVID, this put a lot of requirements in place for multi-factor authentication for people to realize that their their workforce is remote now, and that they do need to have that last line of defense. And so if you did say, yes, you do have a cyber insurance policy in place, have you gone through it in detail with your agent? Do you know what the most important coverages are for you and your business and what you truly care about? Did you check to see if the wording in your policy is reimbursement rather than pay on behalf of? Those three words, pay on behalf of, just as my bottom bullet point says right there, the devil's in the detail. If your insurance policy is written on a reimbursement wording basis, that means that if you have a claim, you and your MSP or the MSP and your client are dealt with handling this themselves, figuring out, how do I negotiate the ransomware and the cryptocurrency? How do I potentially receive back that fraudulent transfer of funds? And then once you've sorted that out, the insurance company is happy to reimburse you and give you all the money that you are owed minus the deductible. Where if you have pay on behalf of, now my insurance company is paying on behalf of my company. They are helping me. They are guiding me. They're making sure that my company is made whole and that we're able to follow the correct guidelines, whether that's regulatory, for notification costs, making sure that my clients are still happy and my reputational harm is not ruined is extremely important. What I'm always discussing and explaining is that not all cyber insurance policies are treated equally, and that's because they're not. They're built differently. Different insurance companies are willing to take different risks. So you need to have that conversation with your insurance agent, and they may not specialize in cyber insurance. And so finding someone that does and having that general conversation is so important. And I know that a lot of the MSPs that I work with are constantly having these conversations with their clients because they want to make sure that their clients are protected if a cyber incident occurs. And again, the MSP is doing everything they can. They vouch for you. They try their hardest in cybersecurity. But if your endpoint user doesn't follow the right steps and doing everything that you've put in place, that's where you're going to potentially have a cyber incident. That's potentially where a breach is going to happen. And then now we're dealing with problems on the back end financially to figure out, how do we keep you and your business up and running? So some of the key cyber insurance coverages, whether you are the MSP and you need technology, errors and omission, as well as business interruption, ransomware/extortion payments, regulatory coverages, and cyber crime, these are all things that I touched on before. I'm always recommending, depending on the size of your firm, let's have a conversation about what limits you want to carry. Do you have 5 million in revenues, 10 million, 100 million in revenues? How risk adverse are you, and what makes the most sense for you and your firm? Is it $1 million in limits? Is it 5? Let's just have that conversation to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we know that if a cyber incident does happen, here's where you're going to be covered, and this is the most important thing to you and your business. So for the MSPs, I would hope that you have a technology, errors and omission, and cyber policy in place. Is it a strong enough limit for your technology, errors and omission? How many clients do you have? What type of work are your clients doing? And what services do they provide? Those are all things that we need to bring up. And there's not a cookie cutter solution for every single person, which is why you need to have a conversation. You need to say, okay, what makes sense for me and what doesn't? And then we reevaluate and say, okay, let's build a program around that. For the business interruption, I touched on that earlier. It's going to help pay for lost wages. It's going to help pay for revenue that was lost during that time, and to help keep you with strong relationships with your clients. Ransomware and extortion payment, I'm constantly talking about this. Make sure that you have the right limit in place that makes sense for you and your firm. And the regulatory coverage, like I talked about earlier, what is your state's guidelines, whether it's a local guideline, a state, federal? Making sure that you're in compliance with all of those in the incident of a breach is tough. But that's why leaning on your cyber insurance company to help bring in people to deal with the notification costs, to make sure that you're whole again, is really, really important. And then cybercrime. This is one of the coverages that I see when people are brought to me and they say, hey, Jake, I have a really good cyber insurance policy in place. And I look immediately for cybercrime. That's fraudulent transfers of funds, invoice manipulations, social engineering, computer fraud. Those four are the main buckets of what cybercrime is. Having these coverages does make your policy a bit more expensive, and they don't give the full limit that you receive with other coverages, because this is the number one area in which you're going to have breaches. So making sure that you even have this coverage in the first place is extremely important. And then if you want to look for higher limits, okay, let's have a conversation about what we need to do and the types of procedures you need to have in place in order to receive those higher limit options.
Sorry, Jake, we have another question that just came in. Could I go ahead and ask it?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
And I think the question relates to this key insurance cyber coverages that you just spoke about. So the question is, what are you seeing in the marketplace as it pertains to MSP insurance policies and coverage and pricing?
Awesome. So yeah, we'll take that question one part at a time. So what am I seeing in the marketplace right now for MSPs? I'm seeing a big shift in insurance right now for MSPs. Companies that wanted to write them before are getting out of the space. They're changing their what we call appetite or underwriting guidelines, stating that they don't want to write MSPs. And so the marketplace is getting much more narrow, meaning limits, you're not going to be able to get as high of limits anymore. Pricing may be a little up. But that's why you need to have a conversation, and you need to work with someone that understands the marketplace and is able to vet that for you and to shop that for you. So it's important to see, okay, what limits do I have in place currently? What limits do I want to have? And what's going to protect me? And like I touched on earlier, let's have that conversation. Who are your clients? Are you working with Fortune 1000 companies? You're working with small to mid-sized businesses? Do you have a very large clientele or maybe a smaller clientele, which is going to allow you to have higher, lower limits depending on how risk adverse you are? Because again, it needs to be what makes sense for you and your business. And if someone's not, an insurance agent's not wanting to have that conversation with you as the MSP about that, then it should definitely bring up some alarm bells that maybe they're not really understanding or fully concerned about everything that you're worried about right now.
So Jake, just one follow-on question that I have for you regarding that. So I hear you say a lot of cybercrime may be driving the changes in the insurance industry. From an MSP perspective, does that mean that MSP should start going through some sort of compliance check audit with their clients to ensure that their clients are up to date with their cybersecurity before an MSP gets involved because of the liability that comes from insurance? Is that correct?
Yes, David, and you just hit it on the head, and that's exactly correct. And you're fully taking in everything that I'm putting out on the table right now. You need to have conversations with clients or potential clients before bringing them in. I do the same thing with all of my clients or potential clients as they're brought in. I immediately bring up cybersecurity because that's something that's so prevalent and so important. And if I'm not making sure that they want to take the right steps, that's okay. They can go work with the other 1,000 insurance agents in Colorado or elsewhere. And similarly for an MSP, if you have a client that's not willing to invest in the right cybersecurity that you know that they need, then it might just not be the right relationship for you, because again, you're putting so much of your business and liability on the table by going and working with someone that doesn't want to do the right things. And if the business owner doesn't want to do the right cybersecurity procedures, imagine what type of values they have at that company and how they relay that to their endpoint users. It's probably really lacking, if I had to imagine. So you do bring up a great point, Dave. Making sure you're working with the right clients and not overstepping your boundaries in areas where you might just be helping is definitely really important. So thanks for that kind of follow-up question.
Great. Thanks, Jake.
All right, so we kind of discussed some of the benefits of cyber insurance. I'm going to kind of jump into what we do here at Lakeside. So we're very involved and supportive with our management. Like I said, We have conversations. We're open-ended. We don't provide cookie cutter solutions, and we don't tell you what you need to have. And we have open-ended discussions to say what you want to have and if that makes sense for how we like to partner with our clients. We have exceptional safety and risk management culture with all of our partners. Like I said, if it's not the right fit for Lakeside, we're probably not best to partner together. Similarly for you as the MSP out there, as clients are reaching out to you, make sure that it does make sense. And it's obviously easier to say when you have a revenue stream coming in the door. But even if you don't have a large revenue stream coming in the door, you bend over backwards to work with a client that might not be the right fit, and now they have a breach and are potentially coming to sue you. Was that revenue even really potentially worth it if you're not retaining any sort of the money that you brought in, because now they're dealing with breaches and they don't want to do the right things? So consider that as you're working with clients moving forward, and maybe look at some clients that you currently have now to say, is that the right fit for me and my firm? Touching on it again, as I do always in my presentations, proactive safety policies, procedures, and controls. We need to have proactive and not reactive controls in place, making sure that everyone is on the same page, raising their hand if there is a cyber incident, and knowing where to go with that cyber incident response plan. We have focused training and orientation programs. And then again, the most important thing is the claim experience. We have great relationships with our insurance company partners. I have great relationships with all the MSPs that I work with to help my clients put cyber insurance policies in place. We're constantly talking. We're making sure we're on the same page. And if I see something come up that may be fishy, whether I'm on a website or I receive an email, I'm going to make sure to send that right to that MSP so that I can get things moving forward and sort it out in a very strong, proactive manner.
Sorry, Jake, could I interrupt one more time, please?
Yep.
We had a comment come through, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to it. The comment that came through was, the paradigm today might well no longer be if, but when you suffer a ransom data breach or other cyber attack, but that is likely to have just happened. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, so I guess what was technically the full on question coming from that? Because you're right, it's not if, it is when are you going to have a breach. And so being able to be prepared, if I'm looking to answer this question the right way, knowing that you're prepared internally at your firm, that you've worked with your MSP to make sure that they know your cyber incident response plan. And then that last line of defense is the insurance company to allow you to get made whole. And you're right, it's not if, it's when. And fortunately, for those companies that have not been breached, there have been thousands of companies that have been breached in the last 5 to 6 years. These cyber insurance companies have so much experience handling, mitigating, and dealing with claims that most of the time they're almost always able to return all the funds that you might have fraudulently sent. They can negotiate cryptocurrency amounts down. So it's a great point. And just making sure that you are aware and everyone's on the same page. And from the MSP perspective, have that conversation with your clients. Make sure that they do have a cyber insurance policy in place, and make sure that it's a strong policy, not just one that their cousin or brother might have put in place because they've been their agent for 20 years, but do they really understand what's actually covering them in the business? Because if and when this breach does happen, are you going to be made full? And is your client going to be made full? Is definitely something that I'm always discussing with clients, and I'm glad that somebody brings that up. So thank you for that. It's a great question.
And I think this touches on another comment we just received, Jake, with regards to what you just mentioned. Let me read this to you quickly.
Please do.
MSPs that have customers with boards, at least at public companies, need to know that not having cyber insurance might be deemed as per regulatory violation of the enhanced corporate governance duties under the new SEC cyber rule. So what I'm hearing there is companies need to have this. I think we all agree on that, right?
Right.
My question, and what I would like to expand on that comment, is what about the companies that don't know they need to have it? How do they find out about it? If so, no one has an insurer to go to, no one has an MSP that may have the knowledge about it, how do those companies, which are probably publicly traded, how do they find out?
That's an awesome question. So thank you to whomever asked that. I really appreciate you bringing up the new guidelines and measures that are in place. And just to start from the beginning of that, if a publicly traded company either doesn't want to put cyber insurance policy in place or knowingly doesn't, then that's negligence on their end to start, right? And as a public company, imagine all the shareholders that would be concerned to know that their company that they're paying for stocks and shares for doesn't have a cyber insurance policy when it could potentially put them out of business if they do have a claim. Now, jumping into the other parts of the question, Dave, you're right. Who do we go to in these situations and who do we rely on? Because I rely on my MSP partners to keep me in the loop with cybersecurity trends they're seeing. I keep my MSP partners in the loop with trends that I'm seeing on the claim side of the house, on coverages, on premiums that are going up, down, whatever it might be. And so having different types of people we can rely on is really the most important thing. But even if you have really good people that you can rely on, making sure that you're staying up to date with public knowledge, whether that's information that's shared on the news, information that the MSPAA might be sharing with people. We all need to be in this together. And that's where really just being front of mind, and I keep saying it and I will continue to, being proactive and not reactive. Don't wait to find out that you needed to have a cyber insurance policy in place. Look into it. And you're right, Dave. We can all agree that at this point, having a cyber insurance policy in place isn't what people thought 5 to 10 years ago. It's not your frivolous coverage. It actually will, and it does, and it has covered many different businesses and kept them afloat during a time of a cyber incident. So it's all about being proactive, raising your hand, and making sure that you are looking into the right avenues to really understand what your risk is. So again, I know it's not an exact answer that you may be looking for, Dave, but that's what I'm doing on my side of the house. That's what I'm constantly discussing with clients. And I'm sure that you're seeing it on your side as well.
Thanks, Jake.
You're welcome. All right, let's jump into something I've kind of been talking about the whole time, but the importance of a trusted insurance agent and IT/MSP provider and that relationship that they have there. So you see the two hands shaking across from computer to computer. And I feel like I'm doing that on a day-to-day basis as I work with clients, as I work with their MSPs to have conversations about completing cyber insurance applications. Whether you've had a claim in the past or potential incidents, we can work around that. But unless I have a good relationship with your MSP and you have a good relationship with the two of us together, it's going to create a much stronger bond and allow for you to get strong coverages, as well as these additional things I've discussed. Set up security awareness training, do phishing simulations, create a strong cyber incident response plan. Maybe you are doing work with federal government entities, and now we are diving into the CMMC and NIST compliance space. There's so many different things that as a business owner, you need to be worried about and concerned about, but you don't have time to think about all these things. So relying on your MSP, relying on your insurance agent to be that outsourced risk manager and not just put a policy in place, but actually provide services and help you in your firm is so crucial. It's so important and something that I'm constantly discussing, and it's just helpful. It really is having those good relationships with people that are just interested in helping one another and making sure that all of us small to mid-sized businesses are able to continue operating on a daily basis. So I went through a lot. I know there's a good amount of information that was shared today. I know there were some really good questions. If anyone has any other questions that they wanted to bring in, I'd be happy to answer those now. We do have a few more minutes in the webinar. So Dave, did anything else come in that you saw on your end?
Yeah, Jake, we do have one question. I think you probably covered this, but let me go ahead and read it for you. As an MSP, if I have a technology omissions and errors cyber liability policy in place, does that protect my clients if they have a breach?
That's a really great question, and thank you for bringing that up, Dave, and whoever asked that as well. I do appreciate that, and that's something that I'm discussing with MSPs too on a daily basis. They might think that I have this policy in place. It's technology errors and emissions, cyber liability. I have 5 million in coverage, and I'm protecting all of my clients. Well, no, that policy protects you and your firm for any error that you might have done when working with your client, as well as having strong cyber coverage to make sure that you're covered in the incident of a breach. So the error and omission part is going to provide coverage for any service that you're doing for a client and helping them, whether that's software patching, if you're putting in multi-factor authentication, any error that might have been made when you're doing these types of things could potentially come back on you. If your client has a breach as a result of that, the client could potentially come and sue you, which is why you need to have a strong policy in place. Now, flip it the other way for the cyber portion. Your cyber is going to protect you and your firm. Potentially any types of fraudulent transfers of funds that the MSP may have, any type of invoice manipulation, socially engineering, anything like that will protect you as the MSP. But what happens if your client has a breach? They need to have a cyber insurance policy. Again, I've said it before, I've said it again, and I'll continue discussing it. You as the MSP are helping your client with cybersecurity, but you're not the endpoint user. You're not the person at the end of the day that's sitting there on their computer, clicking these links, doing all these things, working on a day-to-day basis. You're just helping with the cybersecurity. So if your client of the MSP has a breach, that's where this last line of defense of the cyber insurance policy is so important. It's so crucial. I highly, highly, highly recommend you as the MSP discussing with your clients. Do you have a cyber insurance policy in place? If not, reach out, figure out who you can talk to, whether it's me, whether it's another insurance agent. Just help your client get in the right space, and working with them to put that policy in place is just so, so, so important. So great question, Dave. It definitely is a nuance and things that MSPs are realizing now, and I'm having this conversation with people all the time, is that your policy is for you. It's not to protect your clients. Make sure that you have your own policy, make sure that they have theirs, and then marry the two so that everyone can be protected in the incident of a breach.
Jake, is there a minimum policy amount that MSPs should consider, or does that insurance amount vary between the different industries and different regulations?
Great question. It definitely does vary between the different industries, different regulations, how large are your clients, how small are your clients. I'm always bringing up $1 million in coverage should be a minimum when you're looking at whether you go up to 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5, or even higher. Again, that's all dependent on, are your companies public entities? Are they private? Do you work with the government entities? Things like that. Let's have that conversation. And there's not an exact cookie cutter definition of a policy that you need, but we can help and provide different limit structures to see what makes sense for you for protection and also financially. And one thing that I'll leave everybody with that I'm constantly discussing, people are always asking, well, I don't know if I can afford this. It may be too expensive, even though it's really not that expensive for cyber insurance in general. If you can't afford the premium of the policy, how would you afford to pay the claim? Meaning, who would protect you if you're not willing to pay that $5,000 for the cyber insurance? What are you going to do when a claim comes in demanding $150,000 in Bitcoin, $250,000, or maybe one of your employees accidentally transferred $100,000 to the wrong client of yours? Again, these are things to think about as we're heading into the new year, as we're looking at budgets for 2024. Think about what makes sense for you and your firm. And as an MSP, what makes sense to your clients? Make sure that they're protected. Make sure that you're protected so that liability is kept separate and you're able to continue working and functioning on a daily basis. And so that's most of the information that I have. If there's any other questions, Dave, feel free to let me know. I know we do have 5 minutes left. If anyone does want to send me an email, add me on LinkedIn or give me a call, feel free to do so. Here is my contact information. I'm always available to reach. Like I said earlier in the webinar, we've always got this thing right by us, so you can always contact me when needed.
Thanks, Jake. We actually do have one other question that I'm going to ask quickly. As an MSP, my client does not want to get cyber insurance after I have highly recommended it to them. What liability am I at if they do not execute on a liability policy?
So I would recommend to keep all those emails, whether it was an email, keep all of that documentation on your end. If these were phone calls or if these were in-person conversations, then reach out to me and we can have a separate conversation about it. Whether you want to create a certain sign off stating that a client doesn't have cyber insurance and they're aware that they don't have cyber insurance, that's okay too. And for that client too, I would also bring up potentially having a general conversation, whether it's with their current insurance agent that you have a relationship, or you can bring them over to me and I'll have the conversation with you as the MSP, kind of teaming up and saying, look, here's your risks. Does it really make that much sense for you to save $5,000, $7,000 a year when you're a $5 to $10 million revenue company? We need to be looking at our risk and the intangible assets as much, if not more. And secondarily to that question, Dave, which is such a strong question, it's not just the liability that that client is bringing by not having a cyber insurance policy to the business, but think about if you're an employee of that business or maybe a client of that business. So I'll go down the client avenue first. If I'm a client of this business and the person that I'm working with doesn't have a cyber insurance policy, they're storing all of my information, whether it's social security, it's my credit card, it's my banking information, and now they have a breach knowingly that they didn't want to have a cyber insurance policy in place and they're not able to make themselves whole. Well, that's potentially negligence on the business too. And negligence is not just on the business, it's on a business owner as well. And so their personal assets, not just the business, but the personal assets maybe be on the line because of their negligence of not wanting to put a cyber insurance policy in place. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. And as an employee of a firm that doesn't want to put a cyber insurance policy in place, what happens if their business is interrupted? We're not able to work for 30 days because we're shut down from ransomware. I, as the employee, need to continue to have paychecks rolling in. And so having problems like that and not able to pay, well, why didn't you put a cyber insurance policy in place? You could have protected us in this situation. Now we're down for 30 days, maybe 60 days. People live paycheck to paycheck. Things are tough right now, and just making sure, again, being proactive, not being reactive, and just raising your hand and having a conversation is important. So for you as the MSP, if you do need help with that, please reach out. Happy to kind of give you some additional information, whether it's marketing materials, things like that, that just show what's happened. And unfortunately, we live in a reactive world. A lot of people wait to do things until a friend of theirs had a problem or someone that they know in the business world. So don't wait for it to happen to you, because it potentially will and can. Put these right measures in place, get everything sorted out so that if and when a breach does occur, you're able to kind of stay full and make sure that you and your business are able to stay afloat moving forward.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that. We are running on time of this presentation, so we will end it shortly. Just so you know, Jake, there was one other comment that came through, but you can view that comment through the LinkedIn webinar and respond as well. But at this point in time, Jake, you have nothing else, correct?
Yep, there's nothing else at this time. I'll respond to that question accordingly and reach out to you directly.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining in today, and thank you Lakeside for this presentation. It was very informative. At this point in time, we will conclude this webinar. Any future questions, you can reach out to Jake directly or through the LinkedIn MSPA profile. We thank you everyone for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Take care.